you all. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I sent everyone an assignment for them to think, for all of you to think about beforehand about the benefits and the challenges of being happy. They tell a great story of a young boy who was asked by his teacher, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And the boy says, "I want to be happy when I grow up." So the teacher tells the boy, "You didn't understand the question." And the young boy tells the teacher, "You didn't understand the purpose of life." It is an accepted premise, an accepted idea amongst probably all humans, but definitely amongst all Americans, that happiness is the pursuit of happiness is a right. It is something that is integral to a happy life, is synonymous with a good life, and that we all deserve happiness. We should have happiness, and that happiness is something that we deserve to have in our lives. However, Judaism, and it's really common sense, we understand that happiness is not purely a pleasure that a person is entitled to. We understand that happiness is a critical tool that allows a person to be able to really maximize and truly live to the fullest extent that life is able to be lived to. And therefore, joy and happiness from a Jewish perspective are not just things that we are entitled to and things that we have a right and a certain human basic right to have, but happiness and joy are tools. They are the method through which we are able to live a more fulfilled, more meaningful, more productive life. Now, obviously, that's easier said than done, and that's going to be the objective of the next 4 Tuesdays that we will spend together, to understand how is it that me and you can come to live a happier life. And as we're going to discuss and establish tonight, the way we get there begins in our brain in a thought process. But before we even get to the thought process, let me first establish a basic premise that happiness is not just a right, but it's something critical that we need in order for us to successfully accomplish that which we need to accomplish in life. So you should have all gotten a student. Happiness is not just a right, but it's something critical that I'm sure now on the screen in order for us to successfully accomplish that which we need to accomplish. So you should have all gotten a student. Happiness is not just a right, but it's something critical that I'm sure in order for us to successfully accomplish
Tal Ben-Shahar, an Israeli born psychologist, began teaching course on the science of known as positive psychology. In 2000, the course worked with the rigor of science. Tal Ben-Shahar, Israeli psychologist, began to explore how to add more intelligence to life, known as how to create joy. In 2000, the course lectured the rigor of science. Within a few years, Shahar's class became the most popular course ever taught at Harvard, with over 1,800 students. In his book, Happier, Learn the Secrets to Real Joy in Lasting Years, Tal Ben-Shahar writes that when teachers are well interested in study of the good life transcends time. In his book, Happier, there are some spiritual aspects in our age that Shahar telling the high demand for positive psychology. In the United States, complaints of depression are 10 times higher today than they were back in the age that Shahar is telling, and the average age of depression is 50 in the United States. One child attacks occurs higher today. A study conducted at American colleges found that 35% of students were so impressed that they went to other countries are following in the footsteps of the United States. In 1997, students 50% said that they were very happy.
The idea over here is very, very simple and obvious. If you want to successfully overcome any of our challenges, any of them, it is critical that we find ourselves in a happy state of being. Now, I don't want to spend too long on this. We have an hour and we'll be very focused on what we don't know, not on what we do know. But we all know that happier people are not just happier. Happier people, as you saw in the video that we played 2 minutes ago, happier people are more successful. Statistically, they're more successful. They have a better job at communicating and connecting and being able to bring others along with their vision and their mission. And the reason for that, there's many reasons, is because when a person is happy, they're more able to share, they're more outgoing. I mean, you see this clearly. Even a shy person who's feeling very happy will be able to express themselves more and be more outgoing. God gives every single one of us tremendous talents. All of us. We are blessed with tremendous talents. But you know what happens? Many of us, or some of us, I should say, don't reveal those talents. We don't actually reveal and bring out the unbelievable potential that exists within us. However, when we are happy, we feel more confident, we feel more excited, and that talent, that gift, that blessing, which may have remained dormant and not so revealed, all of a sudden comes out and it expresses itself in very, very beautiful ways that are very, 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 very powerful. By the way, the opposite is true as well. We all know this from experience. When we're feeling down and we're feeling sad and we're feeling, like we don't have energy, then something playing in the background. Whenever I share my screen. When we're feeling sad, then thank you, Jess. When we're feeling sad and we're feeling down, then we are much more vulnerable. I mean, again, I don't want to spend time explaining that which is basic, but anyone that knows anything about human psychology knows, and I've experienced this, when we don't feel good about ourselves, it's much harder to diet. It's much harder to be focused. It's much harder to make the difficult phone call that we don't want to make, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so why is this? We know this to be a statistical fact, and we know this to be a true reality in human nature, that when we are happy, we are more outgoing and more revealing of our talents and able to control ourselves better and able to focus better. And when we feel sad, we're less able to do that. What is the reading? So if you look in text number 2 that you should have in front of you, and this is going to be pain. Text number 2 is able to do that from the Zohar. What is the reading? The Zohar so if you look in text number 2 that you should have in front of you, and this is going to be pain. Text number 2 less able to do that from the Zohar. What is the reading? Zohar so if you look in text number 2 that you should have in front of you, and this is going to be pain. Text number less able to do that from the Zohar. What is the reading? Zohar so if you look in text number 2 that you should have in front of you, and this is going to be pain. Text number less able to do that from the Zohar. What is the reading? Zohar so if you look in text number 2 that you should have in front of you, and this is going to be pain. The corresponding supernal joy. You understand? The Zohar is telling us something amazing. The Zohar is giving us a spiritual explanation for a physical reality. The physical reality that we all know is that when we are happy, we are more effective, we are more communicative, more expressive, more focused, we're better human beings. But you know why spiritually that is? Because the supernal energies that we are given by God are very much dependent upon the way we behave ourselves. The vessel. God gives according to the vessel that there is to receive. So when we are happy, when we are in a state of joy, then God doesn't just give us what we deserve. God gives us like a happy person. And when you're happy, you give more than you would give when you're sad. When you're happy, you're more kind, you're more sharing. So therefore, the Zohar is telling us that when we are happy, that makes God happy. And when God is happy, then he's more kind and more sharing to us. And therefore, we are able to get more blessings as well. How's that for a very beautiful thought? Tell you a story. The Alter Rebbe was the first Chabad Rebbe. He passed away on the 24th day of Tevis on a Saturday night. He was very sick before he died, and the story of his death is it's an interesting story. It's not for today, not for right now. A few hours before he passed away, he was on his deathbed. And as he was on his deathbed, his grandson, the Tzemach Tzedek, Menachem Mendel, who was orphaned at a young age and was really raised by his grandfather as child of the Alter Rebbe, was standing in the room, and he was praying the evening service. And as you can imagine, he was very, very sad. And yeah. Okay. Yeah, I turned it off already. Thank you. Just let me do one more thing. So he was praying, and obviously as he was praying, he was very sad. He was very, very sad. And therefore, because he was very sad, the voice that he was praying with a very sad song, he was praying with a sad song. And his grandfather, on his deathbed, his grandfather tells him, it's not a good idea for you to pray with a sad niggin, because when you pray with a sad song like that, you're creating a negative energy from heaven. Now, it doesn't mean you can't ever pray with a sad song, but it's a fascinating story. The way we behave, the way we emotionally feel, it's not just the way we emotionally feel. The Zohar is telling us something amazing. The way that we emotionally feel directly impacts the way that God is going to give and interact with us. Well, that's amazing. Hence, there's an amazing text number 4. I'm not going to open up the screen. If you have the text in front of you, it's great. I recommend having it open. It's a statement from the Moshe Leib of Sassoon. That joy is loftier than tears. It says the heavenly gates are open for our tears. The gates of tears are never locked. But joy doesn't unlock the gate. Tears are the master key. But joy destroys all barriers. You ever heard a Hasidic expression? Simcha paretz gedas, joy breaks all boundaries. This is it's a reality. If you ever walked into a wedding, for example, and everyone's dancing with tremendous joy and tremendous happiness, they're all jumping in the air, right? And a random stranger will put his arm around somebody else and they'll dance together. Would you ever go up, not even before Corona, today you go up to a stranger in the store and put your arm on the shoulder and start dancing with him, they would call the cops on you. But even a few months ago, when people were a little less intimidated of human contact, you go to a stranger, someone who didn't know his name, and put your arm on their shoulder and start dancing with them? Never. But when you're in a state of happiness, the natural sense of self, the natural, self-preservation, etc., is it's broken. The boundaries are broken, and when the boundaries are broken, the vessels are open. There's no more limitations. There's no more supernal walls and gates that are limiting what we can receive. And then we are open to receiving more divine energy. And this is a spiritual reason why when we're in a state of happiness, we are more successful than when we are unhappy. One more story on that idea, and then we're going to go to the meat of the class, how to be happy, that there was a chassid of the 5th Chabad Rebbe the 4th Chabad Rebbe, the Rebbe Marash, who had a very, very big issue. His child was sick, whatever it was, and he came to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe told him, I cannot help you. And this was right before Simchas Torah. And Simchas Torah, he decided, I have to be happy. I have to dance with the joy of the Torah, regardless of this personal issue that I have in my life. After the holiday, the Rebbe Marash asked for this chassid to come back to him. And he said to him, tell me, what did you do on Simchas Torah? He told me I made a decision, I was crying. And then I said, why am I crying? It's a happy day, it's a holiday. I shouldn't be sad. And so I began to dance and to rejoice with the holiday. And the Rebbe told him, you should know that in heaven, this decree that I was not able to break, I see now that spiritual decree was abolished, and everything is going to be okay. This is the power of being happy. So let's talk about happiness, right? That's the point of tonight's class. So let's talk about happiness. Where does the word, do you know where the word happiness comes from in English? Anyone familiar with the word happiness in English? Anyone? So let me share with you, in English, the root of the word happiness, if you can see my screen, comes from the word hap. Hap means luck. So you have the word happenstance, happen to happen. You have the word haphazard, which is randomness. You have the word hapless. You got into an accident. This guy is a shlamazel. He has no luck. Shlamazel is hapless. Or hap meaning luck. And so in American society, in American culture actually, the concept of the word hap is the idea of happiness, of a happenstance. However, do you know where the Jewish concept of hap comes from? In Hebrew, the word simcha, happiness, is completely different than this American concept. Now, let me explain to you why. The American idea of happiness is premised on 2 points. Number one, that happiness is a result from good things happening to me. So if I will have good health, if I will happen to get a good job, if I'll have good looks or a good education or a good childhood or a good client, then I will be happy. Meaning that we often tend to think that our happiness is a result of what happens to us. The second point, and the second issue in American culture, is that the fact that some people have good things happen to them and some people have not good things happen to them is happenstance. It just happened to be. There's no real reason or real cause. It's random luck. And this is the way that many human beings have thought about happiness for many centuries. The word hap is a Latin word, etc. Now, before I even get to the fact that Judaism obviously does not agree with either of these ideas, obviously, needless to say, Judaism does not agree that what happens to a person is happenstance. I mean, that's a basic idea in Judaism, that God is not only the creator of the universe, but God is in absolute control of the universe, and every single thing that happens to each and every single one of us at any moment in our day is the direct result of God's master plan. So that's a given. There's, obviously Judaism does not think that what happens to us is happenstance, or that some of us have haphazard bad luck, etc. But even the first half of this idea, that our happiness is a result of what happen to us, is also not a Jewish idea, and it's also not correct. There's a fascinating study that I actually have the entire study in the additional readings, so we didn't share it, but it's a very interesting study. I actually read through this entire study a few years ago. And in this study, it's in your textbooks. But I want to read you something which is not in the text, actually. It says that today we have twice as, if you look at this text, and I'll share this text, but we have twice as many luxuries and cars and games, etc. We're twice as rich, but we're not nearly as happy. Divorce rates are double. Teen suicide is triple. This is going back. This was written in the 90s. Depressions have soared, etc., etc. And if you're reading this text and you're reading through it, you'll understand. And it's really it's basic common sense. Anyone, at least any rabbi, but anyone that talks to people and knows a large variety of people, you know that there are people that have everything, at least on the outside. They have everything that they could want to be happy. They have a good job. They have a good house. They have a good career. They have money. They have a family. They have health. They have everything that you would think is required to be happy. And yet, if you speak to them for a few minutes if you get close to them and you look past the veneer, you discover that they are actually not happy at all. And on the other side of the coin, we also know people that seemingly don't have a lot of good things happening to them. They lost their job, they're old or sick, they're whatever, something bad happened to them in their life. And yet, despite the negative things that happen to them, they truly are happy people. They truly are positive, etc. And so therefore, there is no direct relationship whatsoever between that which happens to you and the state of your happiness. So far, I hope we're clear. Again, if there's any questions, if you're watching on YouTube, you can put in the chat box. So where does Judaism think that happiness does come from? If happiness does not come from what happens to us, if happiness is not a result of those things that we have, or those things that we acquire, or those things that we get, what does make us happy from a Jewish perspective? And the answer is going to be another quote from the Zohar, a short quote, but a quote that is so important. And this quote says as follows: the Hebrew word for simcha is the same Hebrew letters as the word machshava. I'll actually show it to you right here on a PowerPoint. If you look at this, oopsies. You have the word, get rid of this black screen. Okay, I don't know why it always hides over here. If you look at the Hebrew word for besimcha, the Hebrew word for with joy, and the Hebrew word of machshava, they actually have the same Hebrew letters. Look, they both have a beis, both have a shin, they both have a mem, they both have a ches, they both have a hey. So the word besimcha, the word happiness, joy, is the exact same letters as the word machshava. I'll do that again. This is very, very important. This is what the Zohar says. To be besimcha, you know what brings a person joy? Do you know what it is that makes us happy? And the answer is machshava. The answer is that it's your thoughts. It's your thoughts. Your thought process, that is what makes you happy. If you think happy, that is what will create happiness inside you. Of course, the vice versa is also true. If you think in a negative way, then your life will be negative. But if you think in a positive way, then indeed the happiness in your brain is what will create the joy in your heart. And this is the most powerful message that I could share with you, because almost none of us have the ability to change the things that happen to us. Almost none of us have the ability to change our life circumstances, at least not easily. Sometimes we could change them, but it's not that easy to change. But every single one of us has the ability to control our thought process. Every single one of us have the ability to control our mind. And since our mind is the most crucial, the most single important thing in determining the level of our happiness, then all of us can be happy. Because to control our mind, to control the way we think, is absolutely something that is within the power of our control. Okay. I'm going to share my screen again. Again, these are important ideas about moving forward. And really, if I was teaching a class in person, we would have a chance to discuss it. But we're going to share my screen again. I'm going to ask you a question. So you can see the question on the screen. Tell me, please, where on this barometer do you think is the place in which a happy individual finds themselves? Do you think the happy individual is the person who thinks that they deserve a lot of admiration, who give themselves credit for all that they've done? Or do you think that the happy individual is a person who is very humble and does not hold very highly of themselves and don't think that they need much admiration at all? What do you think? Okay, if you have this textbook in front of you, perhaps take a pen and put a mark where you think would be the place that you think a happy individual would be on this barometer, from the person expecting lots of recognition and admiration for what they do, all the way to the other side of the person who expects and thinks that they deserve very little admiration. Now, it is obvious, again, I think it is obvious anyway, that all of us understand that a person who thinks very lowly of themselves and who think that they are not deserving of admiration and recognition for the good things and their talents and their gifts and their looks, etc., who have what we call in English a low self-esteem, are obviously not going to be very happy. Because, and again, I know many people like this. I know so many people like this who have so many good things going for them, but they have such a low self-esteem. They not that they're negative because they're negative. They're negative because they view themselves with such a negative self view, and that could be for many reasons. It could be because they didn't have a loving childhood. It could be because they spent too much time on Facebook comparing themselves to everyone else's make-believe filtered photos, etc. It could be because they have real emotional issues. Whatever the reason. But it's fairly obvious that when we have a negative self-concept, it has many negative, detrimental consequences on us. First of all, you're never sure of yourself. You're never confident in what it is that you're doing. So you're always like worrying, what will someone else say? What will they think? And you're always trying to please someone, and you're afraid to be bold and to make decisions and to take risks and to be to think for yourself. People who have a low self-esteem feel ill-equipped to deal with challenges, to deal with problems, to deal with stress. And I know people tell me, I can't, I have this issue, whatever it is. And I've heard so many issues. I can't deal with it. How am I going to deal with it? I'm thinking, what's the big deal? Make a phone call, whatever you do, you got what you got to do. But for the person that has low self-esteem, what to another person might be a simple job, or just okay, call up the company or call up your sister or whatever, because they lack confidence in themselves, they get overwhelmed by things that might be smaller issues. And perhaps the greatest problem that people with low self-esteem has is that they're super sensitive. Every little comment they think is about them, and you're judging them, and they feel very judged. They feel very, very judged. They think that everyone that looks at them is right away looking at them because they're thinking about them and they're talking about them behind their back, and and then they start thinking, what are they saying about me behind my back? And because they have a low self-esteem, they think, well, they're thinking behind my back must be bad because people only would say bad things about me. And next thing you know, they're already imagining this whole, agenda against them, etc. And I've seen this happen so many times. So it's fairly obvious that the person with a low self-esteem, who puts themselves very low on the barometer, will think very lowly of themselves and will not be a happy person. However, what I want to tell you now is that the person who thinks very highly of themselves, and the person who always thinks that they're deserving of recognition, and who thinks that they're God's gifts to mankind, and is always waiting for people to acknowledge them and thank them and say, look at you, you are my hero, you did this, you did that, you made a delicious supper, they're also, if you dig a little bit deeper, you will discover that they too are also not happy. We're going to read a text about the Euphrates River. Before I read the text, I want to do a little experiment. I'm holding in my hand 2 pushkas. Okay, 2 pushkas I'm holding in my hand. If you listen, how much noise did that make? And how much noise did that make? So you would think this one made a lot more noise. So you would think that why did it make a lot more noise? Because it's more full. But now I don't have a pen to open it over here. But if you trust me, you'll know that this is not empty. I mean, it's making noise, and my kids give charity every single day before they pray. But every day we give charity. But this is relatively, it's maybe a quarter empty, a quarter full, maybe, probably less than that. And because there's a lot of room, the coins make a lot of noise. This pushka that makes much less noise is actually, I can't really show you, but it's actually more than halfway full. You're not seeing it in the camera. It's more than halfway full, and therefore makes much less noise. Hence is the story that it says in the Medrash where they asked the Euphrates River. And they said to the Euphrates River, why is your sound barely audible? And the Euphrates River said, I give forth so much water that develops, so many beautiful trees, and so many beautiful fruit grow from me. I don't need to make noise for people to know I exist. They can see the fruits of my water. They came to the Tigris River and they said, tell us, Mr. Tigris River, why do the waves of the Tigris River so crash against the shore? Why is your sound so audible? And the Tigris River said, if only my voice would be heard, if only my voice would be heard, so I may be noticed. Understand? This is the story. So powerful. This idea is so powerful as well. This idea that people that are demanding recognition, they're demanding acknowledgement. You know why that is? Because deep down, they're really not that happy either. They're not that happy either. You say a joke. It's been a long time since I said a joke. There was a young guy takes his girl on a date for the very first time, and they go out, and for 2 hours straight, this guy does not stop talking about himself. You ever been to talk to someone like that? For 2 hours straight, he does not stop talking about himself. Finally, after 2 hours, he stops and he says, you know what? Enough of me talking about myself. Now it's your turn. Tell me, what do you think about me? Understand? An arrogant person is not happy because they also feel insecure. They also need the recognition of others to kind of validate their existence. They don't feel secure internally on who they are. That's one issue. There's another issue with an arrogant person who's expecting everyone to acknowledge him and to look at him and to recognize him. This is a text from the previous Chabad Rebbe, as follows. There is more happiness upon receiving a gift than receiving a wage. One does not work for a gift and does not deserve it. So when you get the gift, you're happy upon receiving it. Where, however, when a person who works for a wage and deserves the wage, and they get the wage, there's less reason for joy upon receiving it. A person who is overly self-aware, who mistakenly believes himself to be of high standing, who therefore thinks he deserves everything that he has, this person will have no happiness in all that he has. The joy of getting something you didn't expect is so much greater, so much more meaningful, so much more uplifting than when you expect it. When a person is demanding and expecting everyone to recognize how great they are, so they have so many unmet expectations. They think they're deserving of so much recognition. They're expecting so much appreciation. And therefore, they feel, I remember, I met a few years ago, my father introduced me to someone, a classmate of his, someone his age, who authored some books. They introduced me. So the guy says, you know who I am? So I said, no. I was honest. And I could see on his face how let down he was. He wrote some book. He's an author of a sefer, of a book that I'd never heard of before. So he felt hurt. It ruined his day. I saw it on his face. That how could I not have heard of him? This is one of the big problems of our youth today. There's a great book in 2006 called Generation Me. Why today's young Americans are more confident, more assertive, more entitled, and more miserable than ever before. Today we tell our kids, you're amazing. No matter what you do, you're amazing. You lost, you still get a trophy. You did bad, we still love you no matter what. Everything, you have to love no matter what, but you're God's gift to mankind, and we shelter our kids. We always just build them up. And so they walk around thinking that they are entitled, that they deserve recognition, that they deserve what it is that they want. And then when one day someone doesn't give them what they want, they legitimately feel hurt because they've been told that you are the center of the universe. And if you're the center of the universe, the arrogance and the pride and the ego that's being developed in our very self-centered children is tremendous. And therefore the hurt that comes from not reaching or not getting that what you are expecting is much greater than the joy from receiving something which you did not expect or think that you deserve at all. So when people don't expect, they actually get much more happiness from what they get than those who are expecting to receive it. So where does that leave us? Where does that leave us, my friends? Obviously, to have a negative self-image is not good. To have an overinflated, egotistical self-image is also not good. If you think too low of yourself, it's a sad life. If you spend your whole life also thinking about yourself, rather it's also a form of ego. We shouldn't get into that, but when the person is always thinking about themselves, it's also an unhealthy obsession with self. So where does Judaism tell us that we should be? Where should we be? Okay. So there's a good question that was asked. What about people that are not happy because they are not taking action and they're not listening or trusting their inner voice? So we'll probably address that question more in detail next week, actually. The joy of purpose will be next week's class. You ever heard of Moses? Moshe Rabbeinu, the man who took us out of Egypt, the man who stood on Mount Sinai. We're going to have Shavuos this week. And we're going to hear and read about a man who speaks to God face to face, one of the greatest human beings to ever live. Do you know how the Torah describes Moshe Rabbeinu? The Torah says that Moses was the most humble of all men. Now, what does it mean he was the most humble of all men? Moshe was in no way a shmata. He was in no way a doormat. He in no way thought lowly of himself. In no way. The next text that you have in your pages in front of you, I think it's text number 10, is that humility, I'll share it, I guess, is that humility is not synonymous with inferiority. I'm not going to read it out. I'll say it outside. You can read the text inside. Why is Moshe called the most humble of all men? Let me read this last paragraph. This is the meaning of the verse that Moses was exceedingly humble, more humble than any person on the face of the earth. Because Moses was cognizant of his own qualities. He was absolutely aware of his spiritual qualities, of his lofty spiritual level, but he was still humble. He recognized that all of these qualities were given to him from above. He felt that if another person would be endowed with the same abilities and qualities as he, the other would have equaled his achievement or perhaps even surpassed them. It was this that led Moses to be the most humble of all men. There is such an important message that we learn from Moses, but it's for us how we need to have the concept of self. When we have a healthy concept of self, we will find a natural joy in who we are. Do you know what the healthy Jewish concept of self is? It's the Moses version, the Moses model. What is the Moses model? Moshe understood that he was God's gift to mankind. He understood that he had tremendous talent and tremendous ability and tremendous potential, and Moshe utilized it. And Moshe stood up to the Jews and he reprimanded them when they sinned. And Moshe stands up to God and argues with God when he needs to. Moshe is a ferocious warrior for the Jewish people. But Moshe never once let it get to his head. He never once began to think, I am great. I am amazing. I am God's gift. You know how he viewed himself? Moshe said, God has given me tremendous gifts. God has given me tremendous potential. And yes, I have an obligation. I have a commandment to utilize the gifts that God has given me. I have an obligation to utilize my talents, to reveal them, to make the world a better place. But it's possible that someone else would have had the same talents that I have. They would have worked harder than me. They would have done more than me. They would have revealed and maximized and the potential they have even more than I do. So Moshe understood his greatness. But he understood his greatness was not because he was great. It was because God had made him great. Understand? Humility does not mean that we pretend to think lowly of ourselves. That's not humility. Humility does not come from feeling that we have shortcomings or thinking about our flaws or about our weaknesses. Humility comes from thinking about our strengths. Humility comes from recognizing our greatness and from recognizing that that greatness is a gift from God. If you think about some of the things that you've accomplished, if you think about some of the things that you're most proud of and doing in your life, whether it's having children, whether it's a degree, whether it's your look, whatever it is, your looks, your charisma, your ability to connect to people, your kindness. Think about what it is that you're proud of. You built a business, you built a family, and then when you think about how great it is that you did all those things, then think, but how did I do that? What gifts did I need? What circumstances, what opportunities did I need God to give me to enable me to do what I did? Then you will be humble. You're going to appreciate what you've accomplished, and you recognize it's not from you. It's all a gift from God. This is so important in understanding what it means to live a life of joy. If you go back to that exercise that we did before, and you try and see where on the barometer do I put a happy person? Where do I think that a happy person wants to be? Do they expect recognition? Do they avoid recognition? And the answer is that the happy person is at both ends. The happy person is at both ends of the spectrum. The happy person says, I deserve recognition for what I've accomplished. And that very same happy person says, I deserve no recognition for what I've accomplished. And it's not a contradiction. We have to admire ourselves completely for who we are and what we can do and what we have done. And at the very same time, we recognize that we don't deserve any admiration for what we did because it's all a gift from God. This is the key to happiness. The joy of being you. Recognizing that you are a gift from God, recognizing that you are exactly as God wants you to be, and as you are God's gift to the world, you have an unbelievable opportunity to do tremendous things. And yet the feeling of accomplishment will not make you egotistical, will not make you expect things from others, will not make you a person who spends their life, if people appreciate it, don't appreciate who they are. It's the exact opposite. That appreciation of what you've done makes you more humble in appreciation of the blessings that God has given you. Now, that is not the whole class for tonight, although that could be because, and really I can develop this more. The most successful people, we'll stop there. I'm going to go to a whole deeper level of understanding what does it mean to be happy, the joy of being you. A deeper understanding of the self-concept, the way that Hasidic philosophy expects us to view ourselves. And when we view ourselves this way, we will truly be happy. do you know that when a person feels their hand, it's not a good sign? If you feel your hand, it means something is wrong with your hand. And before I said your hand, did anybody in the watching tonight feel their hand? Were you aware of your hand? No. Of course, if you pick this hand up in the air and you smack that hand, you'll feel it. But that's because now it hurts. Same applies in the spiritual sense. When a person senses his own existence, this is a definition of arrogance. This indicates a spiritual illness. A spiritually healthy person does not sense himself. Beautiful. Let's read one more text. Humility means that a person does not sense his own existence. Despite all of his good, he does not think about himself as an object of significance. He does not claim credit or think that he has special standing. A humble person is completely unabsorbed in himself. Do you understand what this is saying? If you feel your head, it means you have a headache. It means you need to take a Tylenol or an Advil, or you need to find out what's wrong. A healthy person doesn't feel their head. Now, of course, their head is working. Their head is there, but they don't feel it. Because a healthy head is not meant to make you aware of the head. A healthy head and a healthy hand and healthy legs and healthy stomach is meant to work in tandem with the rest of your body, and that everything should work together as one, and that everything should be perfect, and you shouldn't feel it working. If you feel your stomach digesting the food, then you got a problem. If you feel your head working, you got a problem. So till now, we're explaining that if you want to be happy, you have to be humble. Humble means you don't think too highly of yourself because of you, but because of you think highly of what God has made you to be, of what God has given you. But if you really go to the core of what is a healthy view of self, a healthy view of self is a person who is completely focused on their mission. They are focused on what they are needed for. A happy person is not living, someone asks, he's not living an outer body experience. A happy person is not paying attention to their body. Think about the soldiers on Normandy Beach about to go into it's about to invade Normandy, right? Or think about a person who's about to climb a mountain. When a person's about to climb a mountain, you know what they are? They are completely and absolutely engrossed in the job of which they're about to do. Is climbing a mountain an outer body experience? No. Climbing a mountain is a very, very focused bodily experience. You're paying absolute attention to each one of your limbs, making sure that your hands and your feet and your knees and your elbows and whatever it is are all working properly. And yet, when you're doing that, you're not thinking about my hands and my feet. You're thinking about how your hands and your feet are achieving your objective of climbing the mountain. When the soldiers were storming the beaches of Normandy, do you think that they were thinking about themselves? And this was saying, well, I think this, I think that. No. The reason why they were successful is because they operated as one whole organism. They were all together as one. This is the concept of flow. In modern psychology, there is a concept called flow. And flow, let me stop sharing a second. There's a concept called flow. Flow means that your entire focus, your entire mental state is completely focused on that which you are trying to accomplish and that which you recognize you need to achieve. So if you read the next text, but I'm not going to read it inside, is that when a person is focused on doing something, let's say playing music, which is the example brought by this author of the book called Flow. I don't know how to pronounce her name. It's a long Polish name, but she has PhD after her name, and that's all that matters. So she writes in her book called Flow, The Psychology of Optimal Experience. You know what? I'll read the last paragraph. It's actually a very powerful text, which is why I decided to include it, even though it's a drop long. And so here's the text from Mrs. whatever your name is that in flow, there's no room for self-scrutiny. When a climber is making a difficult ascent, I'll read the whole thing. When we're active, I'm going to start from the beginning. When the activity is thoroughly engrossing, there is not enough attention left over to allow a person to consider either the past or the future or any other temporarily irrelevant stimuli. One item that disappears from awareness deserves a special attention because in normal life we spend so much time thinking about it, and that is our own self. This is actually a beautiful text. In flow, there is no room for self-scrutiny. When a climber is making a difficult ascent, he is totally taken up in the mountaineering role. He is 100% a climber. He would not survive. There is no way for anything or anybody to bring into question any other aspect of himself. And I would add to that if the climber scratched his arm, and even if he's bleeding, he doesn't say, oh, I got a scratch, I'm going to stop climbing now. He puts the scratch on the side, doesn't even think about it because he's so full. He might not even realize he cut his hand. I'll tell you a story. I did some gardening a few weeks ago. I decided to do gardening one day, it's quarantine, on Sunday. And we had all these bromeliads that were totally overgrown in our backyard. And I got a machete out and I was chopping away and I was cutting them out. I didn't even realize it until after I came back inside. A few hours later, my arms were scratched up for the next 3 days. My arms were burning. I was putting on moisturizer. My arms were burning. Why were they burning? When I was doing it, I barely even realized I was getting scratched. I was so focused on what I was doing. The absence of the self from consciousness does not mean that a person in flow has given up the control of his psychic energy or that she is unaware of what happens in her body or in her mind. In fact, the opposite is usually true. A violinist must be extremely aware of every movement of her fingers, as well as the sound entering her ears, and of the total form when she's sitting on her back, etc., and how you hold the violin and how you're holding your arm. And yet, they're totally not paying attention to themselves. Loss of self-consciousness does not involve a loss of self, and certainly not a loss of consciousness, but rather only a loss of consciousness of the self. That was a great line. I'll read that again. That's beautiful. Loss of self-consciousness does not involve a loss of self, and certainly not a loss of consciousness, but rather only a loss of consciousness of the self. What slips below the threshold of awareness is the concept of self, the information we use to represent to ourselves who we are, and being able to forget temporarily who we are seems to be very enjoyable. By the way, this is why playing sports is so enjoyable. Why is playing music so enjoyable? Why is playing music a release and a person able to release their tension by playing sports, by playing music? Because when you're playing music, of course, you're very aware of how you're holding your body, how you're holding your fingers. And when you're playing soccer, you're very aware of how you're running and how you're kicking the ball and all of that. But yet it's totally not about you. It's about the way you are part of your team trying to get the ball into the other team's goal. That is the ultimate opposite of a humble person. That person has a low self-esteem and the person who has a high self-esteem are all consumed with themselves. Because one person thinks about himself with a negative self-image, so all day thinks bad about himself. The other person is consumed with a positive self-image, but they're all consumed with self. And as long as you are busy thinking about yourself, you can never be truly happy. Just like if you feel your body, you are not healthy. If you feel your limbs, something is wrong. If you feel yourself and all day thinking, this is how I feel. No, now I feel like this. And now I look like this. And let me take another selfie of myself and see how much my nose has grown since my selfie yesterday. And let me see how I feel about the way the person spoke to me. And how do I feel about this? And we start to live life completely from the prism and paradigm of self, self, self. We will never be happy people, because if you're aware too much of self, you're too engrossed in yourself to have flow, using modern day psychology, or to have what Hasidus would call a healthy level of connection to God and to purpose and to mission, etc. Now, humility is not an all-nothing proposition, but just like most of us maybe are self-centered and we are very aware of ourselves, we find times in our day where we lose ourselves, whether it's gardening, whether it's playing sports, whether it's playing music, whether it's painting and art or knitting, whatever it is, whatever activity it is that we find, we understand, many of us do something during the course of our day, during the course of our week, where we deliberately do something in order to, what we're really doing is to let go of ourselves, to be totally engrossed in the music we are playing, or to be totally engrossed in the picture that we are painting, and we are not thinking about ourselves. And that's where we find happiness. That's where we find happiness. And therefore, there are multiple studies, there are multiple proofs, and multiple examples that tell us that the happiest people are the people who spend time not taking care of themselves and feeding themselves and doing things for themselves, but are the people that spend time doing things for others. Surveys of volunteers have shown that volunteering is associated with diminished depressive symptoms and enhanced feelings of happiness, called the Helper's High. This is a fascinating study that followed 5 women that had MS, multiple sclerosis. MS is obviously one of the things that happens to a person that you would think, seemingly say, you can't change what happened to them, and they have a good reason to be sad. They have a good reason to think that life sucks. And guess what? The results show that over 3 years, those of the MS patients that were actively involved in supporting others and helping others experienced increased satisfaction, self-efficacy, and feelings of mastery. They reported engaging in more social activities and enduring less depression. This is the message for us. This is the message that we live in an era in which we are all focused on self. We're all focused on how do I feel? How do you make me feel? The joke, no more than 2 hours talking to myself. What do you think about me? And we're all into our self-image and how we look and how we sound and how we think others see us. And we can never be happy when we are not, as long as we are focused on ourselves. You want to know where a person really finds happiness? When they are not looking for happiness, when they are not thinking about themselves. We find happiness when we do what God made us for. When we not only find joy in being ourselves, but when we don't focus on being ourselves, we just be. We just be ourselves. That's that greatest happiness. Man at his best is when he's focused on what he's needed for. As my father said in the interview that was shared today, and this is the way he lives and this is the way I live. That when he sees something that needs to be done, he says, what am I needed for? Not what do I need? I see something, it means it's for me to fix it. There's a great line from Ellen Langer, professor of psychology at Harvard University. And she says that many people worry whether there is life after death. But think about it. If we gave up self-evaluation, we could have more life before death. I'm going to end with a short but beautiful story. Short but beautiful story. I heard this from a shliach, Radov Peretz. He's a rabbi in Massachusetts somewhere, and he was once invited to a housewarming of a wealthy donor of his. Man was doing well. He bought himself a big, beautiful mansion. He was having his Chanukah Sabayis, his housewarming. I guess the rabbi was invited to come put up mezuzahs, and all of this man's friends and associates were all invited. They come into this beautiful, beautiful, very well decorated mansion, and they're looking at the intricate design on the floor, beautiful paintings, this massive mirror with a very, very intricate and delicate border all around of glass. Gorgeous. Chandeliers, couches, everything. Everyone's oohing and eyeing at the beautiful interior decorations and at the furniture and at the architecture. The mother of the rich man, the Babi, takes the shliach, takes this Chabad rabbi, Rabbi Peretz, to come up and say, I want to show you, think also this is all nice interior decoration? Let me show you the most beautiful thing in the house. And she takes him upstairs. So all the guests are downstairs looking at the chandelier and the fancy glass table. and they go upstairs. She takes him to his bedroom, to her bedroom. She opens the door, and there on the windowsill, the entire windowsill is covered with pushkas, like this, and like this, and like that, and like that. A whole windowsill full of all different charity boxes of all different kinds of Jewish organizations. And she says to the rabbi, this is the most beautiful interior decoration of the entire house. I'm going to end with a learning exercise. You want to be happy? Happiness comes not from thinking about yourself, but from thinking about others, thinking about what you are needed for. For the next 7 days until next week's class, once a day, find one other person. It could be anyone you want. It could be a relative. It could be a neighbor. It could be a random stranger in Publix, and do something for them. It could be whatever you want. It could be a phone call to someone you haven't spoken to, or somebody, calling your grandmother. To call your grandmother might not be easy. She's hard to speak to. She doesn't know what's good. Call your grandmother. Pay on Publix or in the gas station. Pay for the drink of the person behind you online. Pay something forward. You're jogging and you see someone, stop and talk to them for a minute. Offer them a bottle of water. Do something kind. It could be a bottle of water. It could be a phone call. It could be paying someone's grocery, whatever it could be. Every day, find one thing. It could be completely random. It could be whatever you want, but it's be one moment of the day where you don't think about yourself at all. All you do is put yourself in the shoes of the person behind you online or who lives next door to you. Order groceries to your mother's house or to your neighbor's house. Order them order a vase of flowers. Call up the flower store for Shabbat. Order roses to your mother. Whatever it could be. Do something. I'm going to do this as well. This is going to be my resolution as well. Every day for the next 7 days, do one thing to make you. I'm going to do much more than one thing, though. I'm going to do many hundreds, giving out cheesecakes. Do one thing to make someone else smile. And tell me in a week from now if you don't feel happier about yourself. Good night, my friends. I look forward to seeing you next Tuesday to continue lesson 2 of this great series discussing our joy in purpose. And of course, as always, if you would like to reach out to me, have any questions to discuss, please feel free to do so.